And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Chris Essex, who during his near-death experience lived another life, and today we're going to learn about it. Chris, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Chris, if you don't mind, let's just start on the day that it happened and go from there.
Well, funny story about the day that it happened is I don't remember it at all. So the last thing I remember before all this happened was Super Bowl Sunday. And I remember it so well because that halftime show was the greatest halftime show for anybody our generation, which was the Dr. Dre one. But so that was the last thing I really remember. And then the next thing I remember is being under and then waking up. So let me explain a little bit here. So I ended up, the day that everything happened, and this is all from my wife and my coworkers telling me this, I went to work. I drove my son to ABA. He lives with autism. I drove him to ABA. I went to work. I took pictures for somebody's last day at work, before they were retiring. And then I went to the gas station, right? And so I told my boss I was really thirsty. I needed a drink. I went to the gas station, bought a couple bottles of water, and then I called my wife and told her I was feeling weird, I guess, and I couldn't hear. She told me that I was saying that it was comparable to when you're in a pool and you get water in your ears, like that kind of feeling. So I ended up going to the hospital. And later it was early the next morning is when I coded the first time. And in total, I coded a total of 8 times. In the middle of all that, I had 1 heart attack and 1 stroke. And it was all based on septic shock. So I lost my leg in this whole process also from an infection. So that's what happened on this end. On the other end, though, it was okay. So the first thing I remember is walking through a field of I don't know if it was wheat or high weeds or just something. It was about knee high, and walking through, and it was so peaceful. The sky was blue. It was so calm. It was so peaceful, and it was empty. I didn't see anybody there. No animals, no people. I've had people ask me about that if I saw animals or people, and nobody. But I firmly and strongly believe I was at a crossroads there, and I got to make up my mind, the best I could, what I wanted to do there. Because and this will plan to the next part of this, but I have a 6-year-old son. He was 5 at the time. And I think he is what pushed me through all of this. So the other life. So I went through that. And that's about all I remember is going through the field, this blue skies. It was beautiful outside. So the next part, which is very interesting or, odd, however you want to look at it, was I was living a whole other life, a whole different life with a different wife. I had different kids. And it was so trippy. I mean, I remember I had a job at a grocery store, and I was married to a different person, lived in a different house. And it was so bizarre. And I remember thinking something doesn't feel right. Something feels off with this, but I didn't know what it was. I was happy, which was kind of crazy. I was happy there, but I just didn't know what, something felt really off with it. And so when I woke up from everything, I didn't know what was my real life for a few minutes, for 5-10 minutes after I woke up. Because my wife was right there. My wife in this life was right there. When first thing I saw, and the first thing I said was Alex, which is my son's name. Because I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know if he was real. And I was so confused when I woke up, trying to figure out what was real life, what was, and even for a while after, there were small things that felt I woke up and I was still in something, in a dream or, whatever, in a coma. I don't know. But it was, it's just small things. We had to move to a different apartment on the bottom floor because I lost my leg in the process, like I said. And so it's like I left, we lived in one place, came home, we lived in another place. It was things like that that were like, okay, there's an explanation, but it still felt kind of strange all the way around. So I like to joke with my wife that she's not my real wife, and my other life is my real life. And I know that's not the case, but I like to joke with her about it. So that's the quick version. I guess I elaborated a little bit, but I don't. It was just all I can say is it's just really bizarre though. It's a good feeling, but it's a strange feeling.
Did you have some sort of leg infection that put all this in motion?
I did. So before all this, I was already I was amputated below the knee, right? And so this was before all this happened. I had a prosthetic, I was walking fine on it, but I got infected right on the stump. Like I was rushing it, I wanted to walk quicker, I was ready to move around more. That got severely infected. And that's what ended up happening. And while I was in the hospital, I spent about 2 weeks in a coma, 12 days, I believe. And they gave my wife about a 10% chance that I'd survive. And I had to have a surgery. So she got to decide if I was going to have a surgery that might save my life or might kill me, which was to amputate higher up my leg. And so they, at that point too, they couldn't even move me in the hospital bed because my blood pressure would drop so low. So it was just totally a dice roll. They were like, he's going to have a better chance of surviving if we amputate higher, but he also could die on the surgery table because his heart rate would go down so low.
Did you have the surgery?
I did. I had the surgery, and firm believer that that's what saved my life was that surgery, because she said right after that, while in the coma still, I started to improve. Like my blood pressure got normal. My kidneys were still shot from all of this. That was like the first thing to go. Was I was having kidney issues. I don't have kidney issues now, and I didn't before. But whenever my body started shutting itself down, I started having the kidney issues. So in the hospital, I did.
In your other life, during your experience, did you still have the leg?
I did. Yeah. And when I was in that field too, I had the leg, which, both in both experiences, I was walking around and I was fine, and it didn't seem strange either. And I had the below the knee amputated for about 6 months before all this happened. So like last summer, this happened in February of this year. So I got it amputated last summer. So it's not like it was a new thing. I was used to it. But yeah, I had my leg and it felt normal.
During your experiences, did you completely forget about this life?
I would say I did. Like the best way I can describe it though is like it felt strange. Like, when you're doing something and it feel like when you're doing something on your day to day and it feels like something is just a little bit off, but you can't put your finger on it. That's what it felt like. Like something was just a little bit off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Like I was happy in this other marriage. I'm happy in my actual marriage. I was happy with the kids I had in this other life, and I love my son in this life. So I was happy, but I just felt like something was off.
Was the time period in this other life the same time period as now, or like something in the past or the future?
I've been asked that, and it was. I know it was modern enough, but not like 2022 modern. It could have been like the 50s, is what I mean, or it could have been 2022. But I remember there were cars, but I remember also my job was at a grocery store. I think, and I want to say like I was a butcher, like like a meat butcher at a grocery store, which we don't really have those anymore. And so I've thought a lot about that. We don't have that job, so it could have been years ago, but it wasn't like hundreds of years ago. It would have been when there were cars and electricity and stuff.
Do you think you were replaying or re-experiencing a past life?
I've been asked that a lot too, and I've thought about that a lot. And I'm not ready to say absolutely, but I'm not ready to say I wasn't either. Like it felt real enough that I could have been, but I'm a natural skeptic. I work in journalism, and I mean, I'm a natural skeptic. I want to ask questions. I want to get to the bottom of whatever's happening. And so, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I have a memory issue now too. So I kind of forgot where I was going with that.
Was there anybody in your experience that was possibly familiar besides the family?
No, not that I can recall. Because the way that I describe it, how it feels now, is like, when you have a very vivid dream and then it kind of fades as you go through the day or through the month. It's kind of like that. Like, it was very vivid when I woke up, and I wish I would have taken notes or wrote, got more of it on paper. But I didn't, unfortunately. But I mean, yeah, I don't think anybody felt familiar, but I'm not sure. It felt right though. Just maybe not familiar.
Do you think it's possible that you were living in another, like a parallel universe?
And that's something else that I've thought a whole lot about. Absolutely. I mean, it absolutely could be possible. The same with, I put it up there with the same possibility. I mean, actually, I put it up there with more of a possibility than I would put a past life, because, the way that I thought about it, and this is all just me speculating, is what if I slid into a different time, a different life? I'm a big fan of the Avengers and Marvel movies. What if I slid into a different timeline, a different version, in that multiverse? And, I was living a whole different life from it. I got to step into it and then pull right back out of it.
Were the people in this life anybody that you have ever seen before?
No. I mean, like, when I say, like, nobody that I would say that I've seen now. And by what I mean by that is, when it happened, I mean, everybody felt familiar. But now, like, I wouldn't be able to say that's who it was or anybody. I mean, nobody seemed familiar looking back at it.
Before or even after this has happened, are you the type of person that during your dreams you interact with people you've never met?
No, I rarely remember my dreams. So no, but and when I do remember them, I don't interact with people that I've never met. It's always like, about family. Usually I'm dreaming about going on like a trip or something, with my family, but it's never like other people like there was in this experience.
After the experience, have you noticed that you have any new mental abilities that you didn't have prior?
Not really. I've always been kind of able to, like, my premonitions have always been really good. I could always kind of feel when something was happening or getting ready to happen. And I wouldn't call it a psychic ability. I would just say it's that premonition. Like, you just kind of get that feeling like something's going to happen. And I feel like now that's a little bit more pronounced. Like, I'll say to my wife, like, I don't know, somebody's about to knock on the door, and boom, 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 and somebody knocks on the door. And it's just like, I get a weird feeling. And she's always like, "You're so creepy. Get out of my head," because I can tell her what she's thinking before she says it. But I've always kind of had that, but I feel like since this has gotten better.
How have you changed since this?
Oh, man. So I definitely appreciate life a lot more. And that, that's near-death experience aside, I'm thankful for what I have. And you really put into perspective that everything could be gone in a heartbeat. And I mean, that's not something a lot of people in their 20s, 30s, 40s even think about, and right now I'm 39. So it really put all that into perspective. And the thought of my son not having a dad, and I think that's what brought me back, is thinking about my son, because as I mentioned, he's on the spectrum. He's got ADHD. He's battling a couple different things, and he needs a dad. He needs his dad there. And my wife, his mom, does a great job, but he needs both parents. And so that, I think it's really put all that in perspective. Enjoy everything that I have. Even if I live in an apartment, it's not the biggest house. I enjoy it anyway. I'm happy here. I have my family here. It's things like that that used to be like, oh, I want to drive a Tesla and but now it's like, nope, I have a car that works just fine and happy with what I have. So that's the biggest thing that's changed for me. Um, I also look at things just with a different set of glasses, a different set of lenses. Um, and that I don't know a way to really explain that though. It's just like it's like because like you mentioned that parallel universe kind of deal, and so I kind of sit there and I think, what if I did slide? So I look at stuff in different ways, if that makes any sense, which I don't think it does.
Sometimes I personally will dream of people that I've never met before, and I've talked to dream analysis experts, and I think that I've come to the conclusion that possibly I astral travel during my dreams and meet up with different people. So I'm curious if that's possibly what happened to you.
Man, I think it's possible. Anything's possible. I don't know. All I can for sure say is that something happened. And that's what I feel 100% comfortable saying as somebody that likes to have all my stories factual. I know that this happened. What happened, how it happened, I don't know. I mean, I would love to look into it more. My wife's talked about going to a psychic, seeing if they can kind of get into that. And I've never really been one to put a whole lot of stock into psychics, but I'd be open to doing it now just to see if we can find anything else out. So that's something I guess that's changed in me after all this too.
Would you be up for getting hypnotherapy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's something that we've talked about doing too. I would be totally down with that. I think it'd be interesting. And I think there's a lot more that happened that was buried, that's buried deeper in my head right now that I just can't remember. And that might bring it back up to the surface.
I believe you mentioned that the experience kind of faded, at least that day when you came back. From what you can remember, is the experience just as real as you and me now, right now?
Yeah, it was very real. And when I say it faded, I don't mean by that, I don't think it's going into like a whole different mindset where it didn't happen. I think it's faded like I said, like a dream does. But I absolutely believe something happened. I absolutely believe it felt real. Everything felt real. And like I said, real enough to where I didn't know which life was my real life when I woke up from that coma for 5-10 minutes with my wife talking to me. She was there. It's not like 5 or 10 minutes in a hospital room by myself. It was 5 or 10 minutes with my wife sitting right there talking to me, telling me it's okay, telling me my son's okay. And I was like, wait, are you my wife? Are you my real wife? You know what I mean? And it's like, I knew who she was, but I also remember living this other life. And so I didn't know if she was the real one or the fake one. You know what I mean?
How has your wife handled this?
She's handled it very well. I think she's mostly just happy I'm alive. That was her first thing because she didn't think I was going to survive this. But beyond that, I think she thinks it's interesting. Like it was her idea to go to, hypnotherapy or, a psychic. That's all been her idea to kind of pitch that. I'd be like, I think it'd be really interesting to dig into that more because it doesn't make her jealous. It doesn't make her feel like, oh, he was dreaming about somebody else while he was out. She's I think just as interested in it as I am.
That's great. It's great that she's not jealous because of, and she shouldn't be because it's not like something you did with any intention.
Right. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm happy that it was her and my son Alex that I woke up to. That instead of staying in that other life, I'm happy that this is the life that I'm still with.
How have your thoughts on death changed? For example, do you fear it?
I don't fear it in general, but I fear it because I don't want to leave my son alone yet. I don't want to leave him without a dad. So I'm afraid of that. But I think if my son was 40 or if I didn't have a son, it would be a whole different mindset. I wouldn't be afraid of it. I wouldn't be like out there risking my life, but I wouldn't be like dreading the day that it happens someday. Because I think there was two different parts of this, right? So I think me going through that field that I mentioned at the beginning was me at a crossroads. And I really think I got to choose what to do there, what I wanted to do. I think if I wanted to, I could have passed on. But I think I decided I wanted to stay and fight. And I credit my son 200% for that. I think it was absolutely all because of him, the reason that I decided to fight. And because that field that I was in, I mean, that was so comfortable. It was so peaceful, not scary. It was just it was a really calm and relaxing place.
It's interesting because that field or that experience that you mention and describe reminds me of the movie Gladiator, where just at the end he died and he's rejoining his family and he's walking through the fields and feeling
I
the
don't remember
grass.
that, but yeah, now that you mention that, yeah, I haven't seen that movie in such a long time, but yeah, yeah, that you could be onto something there. That what kind of freaked me out with all of it was like I said, I'm into the Marvel stuff, and I don't have you do you watch any of that stuff?
I've watched quite a bit. I'm not all of it.
Okay, so there was a show on there. It was called Moon Knight, and it dug into like that afterlife and ancient Egyptian type stuff and the gods. And there was a part on there that gave me the chills because the main character had died, or he was in the middle, and he was in this field, and it was the only difference was it was like dark there, whereas mine wasn't dark. But and I got to be clear, this show came out after, so it's not like I was in this dreaming about this because I had just seen it in a show. This episode, I watched it in the hospital actually after I woke up, as I was recovering.
Now, you were clinically dead, I think multiple times, right?
8 different times, so 7 times in one day, and then a couple days later I went one more time. And so my wife said that each time I stopped breathing for about 4 or 5 minutes. So they had to do everything, the chest compressions, the shocks, and I don't know how she lived with that, because she had to, the first time she knew I was in the hospital, obviously, but she didn't know how bad it was. So she got a call at like 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning, telling her that first time that I had coded, that that they had brought me back. And she's at home with our son, right? And she can't this was still when COVID, hospitalization stuff was still very strict. So you couldn't have kids in the hospital. And I still don't think you can, but you could only have like 2 visitors total. And so she couldn't just run to the hospital to be with me. And she didn't want to scare our son either, because he wouldn't have understood. And so she had to get him ready to go on his day 2 hours later, just like normal, while she waited for her mom to get there to kind of take over. But she had to pretend like everything was fine. And in the middle of all that, she threw a birthday party for him, because I'm not upset about that either. I would be upset if she didn't throw the birthday party for him, because I mean, he didn't ask for this. So, it's not fair to him if, he didn't get his birthday because of something that's happening to me.
I'm not exactly sure what your religious and or spiritual views were before the experience, but
So before
how have they changed afterwards?
So before the experience, I didn't believe in anything. I didn't, I was textbook atheist. I didn't judge religious people. I just didn't understand. I'm just like, I felt like there was more proof, at least in my mind, that there was nothing else out there after death than there is proof that there is, whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I felt like there was more proof that it didn't exist. Religion didn't exist and it was made up. Now, since I've came out of this, I'm still not super religious, but I'm also not shutting the door on it anymore. So it's like I'm open to hearing what people say, but I'm not all the way religious just yet. But I'm not shutting it down either.
Do you still classify yourself as an atheist?
No, look, at the end of the day, I know that something's there. Like, I can tell you that there's more to it. What is that more to it? I don't know. I really don't know. Like, I don't know if I decided to cross over, if that would have been lights out dark, or if there would have been more beyond that. Um, I just don't know. So, but I'm not hardcore atheist anymore. I believe there's more to it than what I previously thought.
Especially being an atheist, I would think that you went through some level of doubt as to whether you really had an experience, or was it some reaction to the medications?
No, I had never had a doubt about it. Once I woke up, I never doubted it. The skeptical side of me, if you would have told me a year ago that I would have had that, I'm like, oh yeah, I would doubt that. But no, I haven't doubted this experience at all. I know that something happened. And can I prove something happened? Obviously not, but I know that something happened. And I've never doubted that.
What inspires you about your experience?
The biggest thing that inspires me is live for every day, live for what you have, because who knows if it's going to be gone tomorrow. You could get in a car wreck, you could have a heart attack, somebody driving down the road could have a heart attack and hit you on a sidewalk, and it's scary to think about. But then you got to think also, live your life for each day. Don't live it for somebody else, like, being nervous what somebody else thinks or what other people are doing, or when you have a family or you have people that you care about, that's what matters at the end of the day, and not anything else. And I've taken that away. I think that's the big takeaway that I've gotten from this. And and I'm a big advocate for mental health now too, because after all this, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and it was more so from the actual being in a hospital for a month and a half and being scared that my son's not going to have a dad, And I'm a big advocate for getting help if you need it. There's help out there for anybody and everybody, and it's never, feeling like you're alone is never the right. It's never the right way to be.
Can you recall any of the experiences you shared with this other family, like going to the park one day? Or
I remember going to work. I remember having dinner with them. Like I said, I went to work. I was like a meat butcher or something like that. And I remember having dinner with them, like sitting around a table and having dinner. And I remember driving somewhere, but I don't remember where. I don't remember what was going on in that.
do you remember their names?
I don't. I wish I did. And that's why I think I'm absolutely open to like hypnotherapy or some sort of something to dig deeper into my actual brain, to figure out. Because I think all that's there. I think it just needs tapped into a little bit,
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Absolutely. I can give you my email address if you want to attach it to this. I also I've started doing a YouTube kind of thing just because, and I'm not here to plug that. I've done it to just talk about my experiences, and also, if something were to happen to me, I want my son to have something that he can hold on to and watch, because we've kept this like a big secret from him, and which I think is the right decision right now. It's 6. But yeah, so whoever wants to watch my YouTube and ask me questions, it's just my name, Chris Essex 229. And I just started doing it. So if you want to ask me questions, you can on there. We can drop my email address, like I said, C Essex, like my name, ESSEX 1983 @me.com.
What about Facebook?
Yeah, they can reach out to me on Facebook. My page is open. I'm not a private page, so send me a message. I'm pretty easy to find on there. You can find me on Twitter or Facebook. I have a blue check mark Twitter, which I don't think now is as big of a deal, but it was at one point. So I'm easy to find on there.
Well, before we finish up, can you give us one last positive message?
The big positive from all this is there is something there. I think a lot of us are afraid that, if you go into a situation like this, it's just lights out. It's over. And I don't know what would happen if I would have decided to cross over when I was in that field, but I know that there's at least another step, which makes it hopeful for me. But it leaves me in a hopeful place that there is more beyond this. Because why would that have been there? Why would I have had that option if it was just lights out after that? So I do think there's more to it, whereas before I didn't. I just didn't think there was anything else to it. So I would also like to add too, I kind of touched on this a little bit ago, but I've become a major advocate for mental health. I'm always wanting to talk about the suicide hotline anytime I can, and I'm always wanting to advocate people get help, even if it's just like a buddy that, you can just reach out and talk to. And on the flip side of that, you never know when one of your friends are battling something. Just a simple like, hey, how you doing? Sometimes makes all the difference in the world. So ask how people are doing. Let them know they're not alone, because sometimes it's just a very alone feeling, having mental health problems, struggles.
Chris, thank you for your message, and thank you for sharing your experience with us.
I am happy to be here, happy to do it.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.